Bob Coleman. One of the concerns are the driveways that go obviously out to the road. And what is the best way to deal with driveways crossing bike paths?
We actually haven't gotten into exploring that in that much detail yet. So right now we're just kind of proposing our different alternatives, and once we finalize our design, we can get into much more detail about what happens at each property, what happens at each driveway.
But I just think it's a general idea is, we're thinking of a driveway, we're thinking, how many people actually enter into the driveway? Yes, it is a conflict point, but, we're thinking one car, two cars, maybe 10 times a day. So, I mean, it's a non-issue. And obviously, if the mixed-use path is there, people are going to be aware, hey, there might be bicyclists, so it's usually a non-issue. And if you're pulling into your driveway, you're probably going to be doing 5 or 10 miles an hour, and you're going to be aware of what's happening, because that's what you do when you're in a driveway. So, all right.
This is a follow-up to that. Maybe you could look at it for your next presentation would be signage. What amount of signage is going to be required? Because I think that's a visual aspect of how invasive or non-invasive this project is. Whether it be like on the other side, there's a lot of driveways, at driveways where there's stop signs for the bikes as opposed to stop signs for the cars. So the Dyke Bridge intersection, I'd like to see how much signage that's going to require, things like that. So.
Obviously, I presented 2 alternatives for that intersection today. By our final design, we will pick one that we think is the better of the 2, the more suitable for the island. And at that point in time, I have gone to some preliminary signage, but yes, that will be finalized.
Yeah. And obviously down the ferry will have the signage.
Okay.
Yes, you have your So I'm concerned about the overall impact and the ability to perhaps reverse some of this impact if it's only for 2 months out of the year that we're really most concerned about. And years ago, I think around in the early 90s, there was another option that came up, and I wondered if you would consider it to look at, which was a one-way loop. Have you heard about it?
Yes.
And I just wondered what kind of impact that would have. It could be something that could be used just in the summer and not in the winter. It would allow for cars to drive on one side and bikers to drive on another side.
It's hard to implement seasonal traffic measures. So if you're going to say it was Litchfield Road, I believe it was going around.
Well, I think that it could be done several different ways that it could be looked at. Where the paved road would just be for the bikers and walkers and joggers, and then.
I think 2 issues come up. The first, obviously, the fact that 2 months of the year will have a different flow of traffic than the rest of the year. I think that's the first main issue. Second issue is when you split, I mean, obviously Chappaquiddick Road starts at 2-way. When you split into that one-way loop, if you live 0.2 of a mile past that loop off a street, are you going to want to travel that 5 or 10 miles just to get to your driveway when you could guess there's nobody there, and just hopefully late at night you can get that 0.2 of a mile without someone coming in conflict. So I think those are the 2 major issues. And I think that's why I kind of, once they put it off, but thought that it was not feasible design for this.
Yes.
Another question about the criteria for the parameters for the study. Was this set up as a ferry to the Dyke Bridge transportation request, or was this asking for bicycle recreational facilities on Chappaquiddick? Were there any talk about some bicycle facilities along Litchfield Road or onto Waysquig, or from along the section of the Chappaquiddick Road that runs from the 2 sharp corners, between the 2 sharp corners? Or was this, is the whole criteria just ferry to Dyke Bridge?
The roads under consideration for this project only are Chappaquiddick Road and Dyke Bridge Road.
As we understand, that's been the main proposed thing, so we were trying to get the objective look at just what's been kind of proposed and what's been going back and forth. I mean, future studies, of course, could go into Litchfield Road or any network of bicycle lanes using the road.
And if something is implemented such as that, obviously, that can be analyzed later down the road. Say, hey, this works great. We love this. It functions as is. Obviously, it's going to lead to, okay, now we can continue it down Chappaquiddick Road, now we can, you know, kind of make our own network on the island for recreation.
And also on your list of alternatives, how about sidewalks? Or it seems like I'm really concerned about 7-year-olds using any of these paths as transportation by themselves, but sidewalks would certainly address underage use or transportation and or recreation. Was that evaluated at all, or is that out of the picture?
A typical sidewalk is a minimum of 5 feet, and then you would discourage the use of bicycles, and they would still be on the roadway. If you add an additional 8, to make it 8 feet, which would be another 3 feet, it would be able to accommodate another mode, bicycles, and get them completely off the road and increase safety. So I think we looked at how we can get the least impact but get the most out of it. So I think sidewalks, yes, it would help just to get the 7-year-old out of the road completely. But at the same time, we felt like if you add an extra 3 feet, you can get a much greater added benefit from it.
And I'm really interested in that number of 8-foot wide path. Are you guys looking at the AASHTO guide at all for, and now there's 2 interesting things in that guide that I don't understand how you've overlooked. One is that they say the standard now is 10-foot wide rather than 8-foot wide. And also that multi-use paths are supposed to be on exclusive right-of-ways, not connected with roadways. So I'm a little confused how you jump to a multi-use path in this situation when we don't have a right-of-way available. There's no old railroad line or anything. Or maybe you should, as an alternative, look.
It's really nice. I'm on a sidewalk, I approach a pedestrian, I jump off the sidewalk because it's assumed that the pedestrian is the one that should be using it. And then, you know, you don't have the curb cuts to get back up on the path. I know once I'm on the path, you know, how do you get back up on the path? And as, you know, I'm an experienced rider and, you know, if I'm a 7-year-old, you know, I wouldn't be able to do that. And another thing that sidewalks add is drainage. There's no catch basins out there. So if you have an elevated sidewalk, now we're going to deal with drainage. And that's going to be an added cost to it.
Also, a sidewalk kind of adds like an additional lane, but it's raised. So you're adding more pavement out there as well.
Couldn't the sidewalk be placed away from the road?
But isn't that a mixed use path?
That would be a mixed-use path.
Well, not if it wasn't 10-foot wide.
To answer your question about the 8 feet, actually it was changed to 10 feet, but it's still a minimum 8 feet for a rural collector, which Chappaquiddick Road functions as. So for a road that doesn't have that much volume, you can have a minimum of 8 feet for a mixed use path. If it has more volume, you can push it up to 10 feet. And that's why we chose 8 feet also for homogeneity along the bike path, because there's some places along the road that we don't have enough room and we don't want to impact the wetlands. So keeping it 8 feet is something we can maintain all through the corridor instead of having 10 feet and having to bring it down and, you know, confuses the rider.
So you picture it being able to sustain 8 feet for the whole way?
Yes. Yes. And as, just to add to your right-of-way issue, you know, you said they usually have their own right-of-way, you know, what we're proposing, they're all, I mean, you have a 20-foot right-of-way out there, you have, 20 feet of pavement, you have a 50-foot right-of-way. That gives you a lot of space, and as we found, we can get the 8 foot in there with at least the 5-foot buffer the entire route.
And how much would you have to move the road to make that happen?
The biggest spot would be at the start of, after this we can take a look at the parking lot. It's going to need a shift for approximately the first, I want to say 1,500 feet. And then after that, I think there's 2 issues where it's only about a 300-foot section that would have to be shifted.